So hi everybody, we're just gonna wait for probably like a few minutes, but it looks like most people are actually already here, so we might be able to start earlier. Just so you know, this is being recorded. So if you are not comfortable with your face showing, which most of you already don't have your cameras on, so that's perfect. But just letting you know that this is being recorded and it's gonna be emailed to you afterwards, so that you can re-reference it. And there's also some people that couldn't actually attend in real life. So they'll be getting sent the recording as well. In the meantime, let me just, I guess, kind of get started on a quick introduction. Thank you so much for joining us for the tech commodification and the future of music conversation. I'm really excited to be organizing this. It's the first workshop that I did like this, so this is new for me and it's new for you as well. I do think that we could probably get started for real in a few minutes, but in the meantime, if you have any questions, I guess you could unmute and ask me something, and then we'll move into John to do a quick introduction of himself, admitting some more people. And to all the new people who have joined in, just letting you know that this is being recorded, so if you're not comfortable with that, feel free to, of course, turn your camera off. It's always like interesting with these online waiting rooms because like when you're at a real life event, you can like see people waiting and stuff. You can kind of give yourself more space to estimate, but now you have no idea if people are at their computers or not. So you can, I don't know, that's weird. I feel like I'm still, I know it's been like over a year, but I'm still kind of struggling to get like fully comfortable with this like digital event space. Anyway, yeah, one more minute. Most people are here and then we'll get started. But in case anybody doesn't know me, my name is Sofie. Some of you may know me as Sonja. I perform under that name. I'm based in Toronto. I'm a musician and DJ, and I started Biblioteka Records, which is the company or record label that's co-presenting this event in participation with Ryerson University's Professional Communication School. So, John, if you want to introduce yourself and get started, we can just jump right in.
Sure. Thanks, Sofie. So welcome everyone to Technology Commodification and the Future of Music. Delighted to be here to be a part of this important conversation. I'm John Shiga. As Sofie mentioned, I'm the chair of the School of Professional Communication at Ryerson, and we're based in FCAT, which includes 9 schools in media, communication, and design. And we like to think of ourselves as the creative hub at Ryerson, and we're delighted to have with us today 2 fantastic guests, Jean-Hugues Kabuiku and DeForrest Brown Jr., who are going to share with us their insights into the myriad ways in which technology and economic changes are impacting who makes music and who controls it today and into the future. As Sofie said, the event's being recorded, so if you don't want to be on camera, you're welcome to keep your video muted. And again, thanks so much for participating. I'm going to, and thank you to our guest speakers as well for being here to share their insights. Okay, Sofie, I'll turn it back to you. Sofie, as she introduced herself already, but she's the founder of Biblioteka Records and is also an alum of Ryerson as well. Sofie.
Oh, yes, that's me. So yeah, thanks so much for the quick intro. I already did my own, so I don't want to spend too much time myself. I will be moderating this conversation, but really the stars are Jean and DeForrest, so I'll hand it over to them. Jean, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure, I can do that. I'm Jean-Hugues Kabuiku. I'm from Paris. I'm 29. I'm a musician, electronic musician, and also a theorician. I used to be based in Berlin. I'm based back in Paris now, and I mostly talk and write about music valuation.
Awesome. And DeForrest?
Hi, I'm DeForrest Brown Jr. I'm an ex-American theorist, journalist, and curator. I have produced digital audio and extended media as speaker music, and am a representative of the Make Techno Black Again campaign, which is powered by a gender queer clothing line, gender neutral clothing line called Etcha. Yeah, I mostly focus on Black experiences in industrialized labor systems and innovation electronic music. And yeah, I'll have a book that'll be coming out later this year on the history of techno and technocracy, called Assembling a Black Counterculture later this year.
Awesome. If we can pre-order that, send us the link. I'm really excited for that book, actually. All right, well, let's get into it. The way that we've kind of decided to structure this conversation is kind of separate into like past, present, and future. So let's get started with the past. I do have some questions that I pre-wrote for you guys, and you can kind of decide how you want to take them. But how was the music industry operating before streaming services came? Like, how was the role of the artist in the 70s different to the role of the artist today, like without social media, without any of these like billboard type cosplays?
You want to jump in, DeForrest? I know that's your favorite part.
Yes, the old slave trade. But it's I mean, essentially it's a thing where you have three major record labels, which were respectively founded, and actually, let me see, I have those numbers here. Basically between 1920 and 1950, three major record labels, Sony Music, Universal Music Group, and Warner Brothers, were founded and built a system around copyrights. And they would send out A&R artists and repertoire who would be kind of like scouts that would go into communities and find the best possible singer musician and remove them from that context and sign them up for multi-album deals that would effectively sell their music or their intellectual goods separately from the artists themselves. And this industry has continued to balloon in profits in the following years, particularly in the 90s, after America moved off the gold trade or off the gold standard, and stocks kind of inflated with, I don't know, we're kind of in a position right now where record sales have been down and just falling since 1997. And a lot of this has to do with the inflated stocks of intellectual materials being sold wholesale in things like commercials. Like, I mean, we've all seen like Dolly Parton, like selling her masters and all of her copyrights to Universal Music Group. Like recently, this is what I consider to be kind of a cash out at the end of 10 years of a music streaming system like Spotify that pays artists 0.004 cents for every listen, versus, you know, the $10,000 bonuses and royalties and things that would be given out in the 70s. I mean, a lot of those deals in the 70s were scams, but that's what it was built on. And so, yeah, we're kind of in a situation right now, I guess, where all of music is just floating on a few different platforms of Apple Music, Spotify, and Tidal, which is now owned by Square, which owns Twitter.
I didn't know that about Tidal.
Yeah, that happened a week ago, I believe.
Oh, wow. So we're seeing like a huge, basically like takeover of the music industry by the tech industry completely now, with like Twitter basically owning a streaming service.
Yeah, I mean, the copyrights have to go somewhere, right? When you're not tying things to physical, like when you don't have like physical vinyl that contains the music and like tells you the copyright credits, it's Spotify kind of positions itself, I guess, as let's call it a tax haven, or kind of like an offshore bank for music right properties. And the actual vinyl or CD itself is this kind of past commodity that once had value, but, you know, you try to take it to a pawn shop and sell your old, like, you know, limited edition Pink Floyd, whatever, like, you won't get the $100 that you paid for it back in the day. It's kind of like Beanie Babies. And yeah, so yeah, I mean, we're kind of in a position where we actually have to question what, or at least for me, we have to question what is music. Yeah, sure, we listen to it, but how is it being packaged at this point? And are we, when you think about websites like Rolling Stone kind of telling people how to optimize their music production for something like TikTok, we have to kind of question if we're even dealing with music anymore and what the economy for these old copyrights, or really what's the value of these old copyrights in relation to a TikTok song, like a 5-second TikTok song now.
Right.
Yeah.
That's those are some good. Oh, sorry, John. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, like the thing is like, yeah, as you said, like this, we'll say that music evolved with tech, and that they were always like interlinked. First the vinyl, first the CD, and now it's dematerialized. But more than the dematerialization of music, you have the financialization of the music industry. Because it's not linked to material anymore. It's like as a little bit like the stock market, which, as you said, the golden standard is not what is like giving value to currency in America, to the economy in the US. So we have this evolution, and then I guess there's like this kind of like embrace of two things. Is like the techno-determinism and financialization, but financialization of like life overall, like because everything is financialized. Like I didn't know like GameStop had stocks, and like for example, like the fact that people could just like gather around on a Reddit thread and just inflate the stock of a dying franchise just for love, just show you how everything is financialized in like our current society right now.
Yeah, everything's definitely becoming more like commodified. Everything's like sold as an object. Everything is a price tag. This kind of leads me to something else that I want to ask. Like DeForrest, in your last point, you were talking about how they were like used to be. I guess it still kind of is like 3 major record labels that would make all the decisions. They would build all the artists. But now we have still the big labels, but we also have like music streaming art services, and like basically like there's this whole conversation of like, are labels even needed anymore because so many artists can choose to release independently. So I wonder what you two would think about like who's really in control now. Is it still the labels? Like, do they still have the power that they used to, or is it all being given back to the artists or to the streaming services?
It's a combination of the streaming services and the 3 major record labels, and the artists basically have no say whatsoever, which is the beauty of something like Bandcamp, which is effectively, it serves the purpose of smaller labels or smaller independent labels of old, kind of like 4AD, XL. But I mean, even XL and 4AD had to formulate under the Beggars Group and team up with Rough Trade and have like an actual record store outpost with Rough Trade in order to maintain its like, it kind of had to build a monopoly structure, like these independent record labels, in order to offer any sort of creative or financial control. But when you think about something like Universal Music Group, I mean, they're funding Spotify, and they own the majority of like there's these things called back catalogs, which is all the like nice, you know, Motown hits that we still remember. Like I was going through Motown's, like the Detroit record labels best of songs the other day, because they had 110 Billboard #1 hits in the 60s, like just like in a row, and they had this kind of like hit factory going. But what happens with music like that in a time like this with a streaming service and these record labels is that those artists are dead. Coltrane's dead. Miles Davis dead. So who's making that money? And if the record labels own the copyrights of those songs, they're essentially doing things like paying themselves to put out. I mean, that's why the Marvin Gaye's family, like the Marvin Gaye Foundation, will sue anyone for anything. It's
like a rent economy. Like they're just like, yeah, just like milking the back catalog. And then also there's the financialization where it's like a company can buy, like, I think like it's like Mariah Carey who sold her back catalog and then sold for like multi-million dollars.
Yeah.
So like then like every Christmas time, when like like what's the song again? When there's always
All I Want for Christmas. It's perfect for fourth quarter stimulus, which is what my dad calls Christmas.
So like every Christmas, this song gets played a lot. They basically go back to the chart when it was like recent, when like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I don't know.
It's an abstract landmine that like it's like literally on Christmas, like as soon as Christmas time rolls around, you step on the like bomb, and then like the Mariah Carey songs everywhere, and she's making millions, and you're just that's it.
So like they're milking this catalog. So like for like basically like record label like in pop music are stock trader now, and for like the more like, how I can say, I don't know how to call it, like the underground, but it's like, it's a weird way to say, like, I don't know what is like left field music, like where like smaller label, like their role is like really to be like depending which field they are, but like overall their role is really to be like a good curator, because like when somebody is gonna check the catalog, they want to kind of have the same feeling when they listen to the music of this record label, or the same kind of like, if you are a DJ, the same kind of like intensity of genre. So like there's really like this thing like of like two parts of like, these like these big labels, they're like milking the back catalog, and you have like smaller one who have to be like have this role of like curation, but they don't really have the means to like to like develop their artists, because like PR campaign costs a lot, so like they really do like the minimum that they can do, and then it's all like, you know, Twitter followers, Instagram followers, and so on. So it's like this is where like TikTok go into the mix, because a song on TikTok will do more for you than a PR campaign, basically, like on Pitchfork or whatever. So now we have like all those things where like we knew what it meant, but now we don't know what they meant anymore. Like a real label, we don't know what it means. Or like being a music critic, music criticism, like what does it mean today? It's like,
I mean, I can tell you that it's I've been writing about music since 2010, and it's been very interesting watching criticism just degrade and people lose their jobs for 10 years. I mean, Vice literally fired their entire staff twice across the last decade. Rolling Stone went bankrupt and back again, and now it's owned by, I forgot the name of the company that owns Rolling Stone, but that company just merged with Billboard.
So like, how is this decline in like the amount of music critics affecting the output of music itself? I'm curious if you think it's like correlated.
Well, it's lawless. It's just completely, you get rid of the middleman of the critic who can't say that a record is bad. I mean, then you could just, that's how you get a decade like we did of the last 10 years, the roaring 20s of really bad pop music that all, was completely candy manufactured, but people like the Marvel films just like ate it right up, because that's what pop is for. It's popcorn. You just like pop it right in your mouth and you don't care about it. And yeah, there's literally no one to put an alternative cultural value on this economic stock at this point. And all the left field music is actually over in Europe. That's kind of been the interesting thing, is when I talk about like having been a journalist for the last 10 years, I mean, applying to places like Rolling Stone, working at an American electronic music magazine like Accelerator, who was bought by Spin. And so I was in Spin magazine, basically with Stereo Gum, like right next to me. I had no clue Stereo Gum was owned by a company on Fifth Avenue until I was there. And then suddenly Billboard comes in and buys Spin, and then kicks off Accelerator, and Accelerator goes out of business effectively, and now it's an independent blog run by one dude trying to push NFTs on dance music folks right now. But at the same time, Mixmag and Resident Advisor, two British magazines, one British magazine that's been around since 1983, Mixmag, and Resident Advisor, a newer British magazine that started in 2001 after the dance music industry crashed in 97 along with the dot-com boom. Both of those companies decided to set up shop in the middle of Brooklyn and tried to convince the world that there was a dance music industry in New York. At the same time that Red Bull Music Academy was also trying to convince the world, and also Boiler Room, all these like startups were trying to manufacture PR when all of the American music magazines effectively were gone. I mean, there was literally like a 20-something-year-old running Rolling Stone because his grandfather like just gave it to him in like 2010. So
yeah. So it wasn't
yeah.
trying to manufacture like pop stars like Britney Spears. It was like trying to manufacture these like underground, so-called underground artists.
I mean, yeah, ghetto gothic. Like we think about the entire Jersey Club uptick. We think about, you know, like people like Night Slugs who are literally on the back end funded by Warp Records. I mean, which is why all the Night Slugs people will be producing Kalela tracks. We're seeing like market consolidation at a level that is, yeah.
I think we're seeing a lot of strangeness of like artists basically being used as like props or tools. Like this whole like human factor of the artist is being completely removed. Like I read an article recently that, or like, I don't know if it was a tweet maybe from like Sherry Hugh or somebody, but the tweet was like, Travis Scott didn't release any music and yet he made so much money off all these promotions last year. This shows to me that the artist is a billboard. I was wondering what you guys would think about that. Like, is the music like completely out of it? Is it just now like a famous person that we're looking at who happens to sometimes make music?
Yeah. Yeah. You want to go ahead? I can, as you want. The thing is like, really, as you said, is like the artist is a face for something, not for the music, like the music that being in the mix, and like it's like almost an accident. And the thing, for example, for Travis Scott, is a good example because it's literally an industry plant. So like. When he first started, he was produced by Kanye and all this team of good music record and so on. So it's like he's a product. He was manufactured, and as an artist, because like he even like had like issue of plagiarism, literally. So like what you put really as like a pop star. It was a little bit like that before, but like now we're like in this kind of like wild wet dream. So like what you really put as a pop star is like really like, I guess, your personality or whatever, but like then anything else can be almost automatized. And like the for example, the music, and like as you said, he made so much money out of like this collab because first, like the music doesn't, it's barely a source of income even for like those pop stars. It's more like selling an experience through the live and everything else. So like, yeah, you really pointed out something, and like it reminded me like in Japan they have like this artificial pop star made of AI with the vocalist, and they have like people wearing their masks. They have people going to their concert and stuff. So like, it's really yeah, like the artist and the music is like an equation into like the pop star, but it's not really like the main question or the main thing.
Do you think that most like uber famous people are kind of like industry plants now? Like I know in our last conversations we talked a lot about industry plants, like when we were prepping for this event. And we also talked a lot about like celebrities kind of being forced to take on these, like famous musicians being forced to take on these like sponsorships for these brand deals, like Beyonce with Peloton and Cardi B. Like I saw her do like some random like commercial recently. And it just kind of leads us to the question of like, is there even money left in music anymore? Like, is this something that they're actually trying to do?
Yeah, you want to go ahead first?
I mean, sure. That's a really funny question to ask, actually. Is there any money left in music? Because I mean, the dirty truth is, when Arcade Fire won the Grammy of the Year in, what was it, like 2010, my mouth dropped. And I remember being in college in Alabama and everyone being like, who's Arcade Fire? And I was like, oh no, this is the moment in which, you know, there's a thing that happened that same year, or I guess 2 years prior, in business economics, in which it's called a glass cliff. Basically, the economic crash kind of hit, and a lot of women and minorities were given top positions in like a bunch of like Wall Street companies and firms and stuff. And then the crash happened on them. And the moment I saw Arcade Fire, this indie band that had been signed to Merge Records for 3 albums, like was being lauded by Pitchfork, which was a company run in Chicago by like 3 people at that point. Well, I guess it had gotten kind of decently big by that point. But I mean, the thing about Arcade Fire is that Pitchfork gave them a 10 out of 10 the exact same year that Facebook went live. And you begin to see a kind of decentralized trade route of PR emerging with a band like Arcade Fire that has never been seen before in music history. And what I mean by that, it's like, I mean, sure, maybe the Beatles. The Beatles are probably another industry plant like that is just like, that's meant to like refinance like 1950s like rock and roll after Little Richard. Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to get at is that it's the moment Arcade Fire, this Canadian rock band, was able to win Grammy of the Year and everyone kind of went like, who is this? That's the moment that everyone should have realized that there was a glitch in the financialization of this whole thing. Because you think about it, where Arcade Fire's next 2 records were completely non-existent. I guess there was PR campaigns for the one after that was like all over New York, but the sales weren't that great. And now they've disappeared. It's, yeah.
So there's only a little bit of money sometimes, and only one person gets to decide like where it goes.
Yeah. Like the thing with Travis Scott, I just got reminded because he really came out of nowhere, like as you like mentioned with Arcade Fire, DeForrest. Travis Scott is an industry plant from like popular rap blog from the early 2000s called Il Roots, who literally funded his tour, and so on and so on. So this is why, like in the early 2000s, you have somebody who never had like a finished mixtape or whatever coming out of nowhere and like just like touring everywhere and like doing already deals with streetwear brands and so on, because he was literally pushed by his friends who had like a popular music blog. So like you see also like how like music criticism can operate to like push artists and stuff.
I mean, I guess in this sense, we can kind of think about the word industry in a very literal sense, which is something I'm always pushing when I talk about like techno and technocracy, which is a government or society run by technical experts. So Steve Jobs, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, we can go down the line, the people that put us on this nice Zoom platform, the Macs that we're using, yeah. So it makes sense. I mean, that's what an A&R is, right? It's a person that goes out and finds a property to plant in an industry and then to manufacture songs on repeat. And I mean, that's what Motown was. Motown was a brilliant musical device that was happening at the exact same time as Stockhausen. And I want to present those two together. This like German computer visionary, I suppose, of the 20th century, who was trying to create the sound of German youth. And then you have Motown on the other end, this team of Black engineers and entrepreneurs that got together. They would literally find like women on the streets and be like, you have a nice voice, you come here, you three get together and you sing. And they would grab like, Norman Whitfield would go grab like a guitarist and a drummer and be like, okay, you guys sit here, and they would assemble these bands. And Kraftwerk had this idea of man-machine music, so did Stockhausen. But what was happening with Motown and how you get 110 #1 hits in a row is that you have these experts of like literal like electronic music, like composers sitting down with EQ and inventing new ways of like stereophonic like recording and placing of sounds within a stereo field and creating the most pristine, perfect pop music that has ever been recorded. And then launching that into an industry and watching it just make value.
That's even like what happened with Max Martin and Britney and Rihanna and like all these pop stars that were manufactured. Like they created that Swedish pop sound and they made it blow up. Like all those songs that came out in that time period were pretty much like based on a formula, like you were saying.
Here's a scary thing about that. So they're all on Universal Music Group, if I'm not mistaken. Universal Music Group bought Motown in 2005 and has absorbed this entire catalog. So that may go to show, and that's the point I was trying to make about Arcade Fire. Arcade Fire created this alternative indie rock economy that, everyone wonders why they were into Vampire Weekend in 2008. That's because of Arcade Fire. Dirty Projectors had a whole 10-year career before, Bit to Orca came out and like was pushed by Entertainment Weekly. Same thing with Solange. She was hanging out with Dev Hynes when he was still making indie music in Brooklyn. Like there was this Brooklyn machine that was happening at the same time that the original pop machine, Motown, was getting bought by Universal Music Group. And you have a sort of, these indie artists are the ones who are now slipping into winning these Grammys. Like the Strokes, I think, finally won their like first Grammy, was it the other day? But on the other end, with like Universal Music Group and these big 3 record labels that now own all of their competition in what is effectively a oligopoly, which is multiple monopolies that work together to maintain their ownership and property rights, which is also what NFTs or Bitcoin is trying to do as well, but decentralized. We're seeing 2 different music industries completely emerge, and then suddenly EDM bursts through and creates a 3rd route, which is kind of, I'll just say this, for the last 10 years, the music industry has been gambling on 3 different possibilities. Authentic indie music, which we've now seen Taylor Swift defect to, which I've been waiting on for the last 10 years for her to defect to hanging out with Bon Iver, The National, and trying to refinance these musicians that were given a GQ feature in 2008, along with Solange Dirty Projectors. Haim, Waxahachie, Soccer Mommy, we can keep going down the line. Like all of this like American white nationalist folk music is like, that's the authentic music route. And that's the stuff that will continue to sell as culture. And then you have EDM, which is pretty much dissipated and will continue on in Europe as like the electronic music industry. And then you have pop music. You have Beyonce on Peloton bikes. You have, Drake showing up in State Farm commercials. And I think the next step is maybe TikTok. Like TikTok is the next stable platform for this. So it's,
like, is TikTok like a stable platform? Like how many of these songs that pop off on TikTok translate to listens for the artist, like across the rest of their music? Do you think that this is something that an artist can like really look to? Like they're like, I'm going to engineer a song specifically so that it pops up on TikTok and they can use that as a jumping board for the rest of their music. Do you think that's realistic?
No, I don't think so, because most of the TikTok song who blew up randomly. Like, for example, there is no reason for like Mocha Doma, a Bio-Russian band blowing up on TikTok. So it's like, and you can't plug your brain into like the Gen Z and know what they're gonna make blow up. and if you try, it will sound inauthentic, so it will not work. So it's like it's really a gamble. And there's like song, like for example, like they were like Fleetwood Mac, who came back because like of TikTok, who was back in the chart because like I don't know, they were having fun with the song on the video, and and like so they went back in the chart for 2020 and 2021, and you had like all those like weird electronic music band happening. So I don't know what was the thing, DeForrest, like this like weird producer who got back on TikTok, got really popular. I don't remember the name.
Oh, there's so many. I can't even keep up with these TikTok kids. Like
it was like
it hurts my eyes.
It wasn't Otter, but it was like something like this. It wasn't Board of Canada or Otter, but there was something similar.
Oh, Caretaker.
Yeah, Caretaker. Yeah.
Which is wild. That's so wild that this like 10-year-old album, which is like, and it's funny because what TikTok seems to have done is consolidated the blog era of like, you know, Gorilla versus Bear, Stereo Gum, Ad Hoc, or Altered Zones, which was a synth indie pop kind of, or yeah, I guess synth vaporwave version of Pitchfork that now split off and did Ad Hoc. Anyway, we're seeing this weird blog wave kind of independent free market, anyone can blow up with a single MP3 file kind of market forming here. But, you know, Sofie, when you asked earlier, like what can, you know, how can a musician like actually look at their credits and listens and go, okay, I've made this much money this week. I would say we should probably ask the Temptations. We should probably ask Boots Riley or Little Richard, whose rights were sold to the Beatles. And then, you know, Michael Jackson bought all of the Beatles rights in the 90s. It was like, ha ha ha, now I have Little Richard's records. And then Michael Jackson died in around like 2007. And then suddenly Apple owned all of the Beatles catalog and released it to the world, which is why everyone has been talking about the Beatles for the last 10 years. The thing is, I don't think the intent is to know how much money you're making. The intent is to work. It's to just create content and to enjoy creating the content. And I mean, and that's, yeah.
Like saying content devalues it so much. And I think that like this move to TikTok and like Instagram and like people making stuff specifically for these platforms, like these short little songs that are really popular right now on TikTok about your like day-to-day activities. I don't know, like it's people just rate it as pure content. Like that's not music, that's not art, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, what I've kind of had to decide with this in a way is, particularly with something like Motown, because again, Motown was this genius thing that also is pretty evil. I mean, they literally created a music factory that was like decentralized, where these artists would break apart and come back together. And they got really lucky in the sense with artists like, you know, Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye and like Isaac Hayes that were really getting into the annals of music production and like assembling their own band. So you had this sort of like, in film theory, you call it like an auteur. Like Motown had a few auteurs, which is what allowed for the Janet Jacksons and the Britney Spears and all of these other pop stars to even have a framework. But it's, yeah, I don't know. It's popular. If it's popular, then perhaps that's what a democracy looks like. And that's kind of what I had to decide over the last 10 years of like writing articles about it, sitting in offices, you know, telling editors at magazines that, hey, maybe don't stick that Spotify link up on the website. Maybe we should be paying attention to Bandcamp. You know, I would just say like, it's been so hard being in the music industry and trying to make a living and convincing people to be decent, good people and to actually, do you know that when I was working at Accelerator and Spin, those people didn't listen to music. There was no music playing in those offices at all. I would go to the Vice office and they had baby grand piano, you know, and their like tech office set up inside of an old indie venue called 285 Kent that was closed down so that Vice could put their offices in there and then do a conference on how to save the underground. You know, it's just, I think, and I tell my partners this all the time, or we talk about this all the time, I think we're just in a time of economic evil in which content's content, and we're all neoliberal here, right? So it's just flip the content, make the money you can, and keep moving. It seems to be everyone's solution.
What do you?
I think it's like, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm
John.
not a neoliberal, by the way, but
it was just like we switch into the influencer, kind of the influencer economy. So we don't talk about like artists, we talk about the creator economy and content creator. So we have all this like talk, and it's like when like the thing with Spotify, and like for example, like when Daniel Ek said like it's not enough for artists to make a record every 3 to 4 years. Like what he meant is like you are a content creator, and like every month or every week to like to put out content, to put out like, I don't know, an EP or whatever, or even an album every 3 months or whatever. So I think like this kind of switch happened by like the fact that I feel like the classical music industry as we knew it totally died and got replaced by this kind of like influencer hub kind of thing. And like when you in left field music, you can like you can pay rent by like playing shows, the maximum of shows that you can, and so on. But like now we are in pandemic, and so like how does it work,
Yeah. Do you think that, I mean, I kind of have like 2 questions to jump off this. I know that you said like there's a lot of pressure for artists to like keep making stuff. I do think that one, it's even more so because now we don't have to rely on like physical media to sell the music. Like no one's selling records out the back of their truck anymore like they were doing, in Detroit or in Chicago when they were making house music. And also like now it's so much easier to just make something and put it out. And also like I do think that there's been a bit of extra pressure with Bandcamp Day. Like I've seen artists talking about that, how every month they now feel pressure to make more music because it's Bandcamp Day, you have to make something. Like how do you guys feel about that affecting like music versus content?
If people are thinking like that about Bandcamp as of last year, and I've seen the Bandcamp Beanie Baby sort of I don't know. It's, if they're thinking about Bandcamp like that now, I think we've already been in a time where we've decided that maybe money reigns supreme over our creative output, and they're trying to sell the music instead of figuring something else out. And I say that that sounds harsh, but we've had 10 years, and that's the thing. I always like to present myself as someone who was there, who watched for 10 years as everyone didn't care. Like I did a whole thing on Bitcoin and the music and the futures of music on the blockchain at the New Museum back in 2014, and met the guy that, that sold the first NFT, and no one cared. The magazine, like the New Museum, didn't put any funding towards it. They reached back the other day to try to go, let's like get this like website back online with this like case study about how blockchain could maybe help music, but isn't like the best alternative. They're coming back now for this stuff. Resident Advisor didn't want to run a story on how to fix things back in 2014. They were too busy trying to colonize America and invent electronic music scenes where there weren't, so that they could seem global. But yeah, we've had 10 years of this. And I mean, we can point out someone like Matt Dreihers right now, who was at the forefront of this. He was the first person I met when I moved to New York. He was giving a talk at the Goethe Institute where he was, and I had just reviewed his wife Holly Herndon's first album. So we had talked a little bit, and yeah, his first talk was on how to rethink tokenization in music, how to rethink how to like do this stuff. And he did all these talks for 10 years, at CTM, at Unsound. He would go to Resident Advisor and do their podcasts, and nothing. We've seen zero efforts to stop this. I've seen everyone listen to TikTok, and you know how you stop this? You delete Spotify right now. You delete Apple Music. You delete all of it, and you go buy the music. And it's not even up to the artist anymore. It's up to the consumer to decide whether or not they will allow Daniel Ek, who doesn't even call Spotify a music company. It's a media distribution, like media aggregate company, I suppose. It's up to the consumer now to actually give some people power. I saw someone in the comments say, hey, I'm not a neoliberal, I'm a leftist. It's like, show it. Let's go buy these records right now.
Because Spotify have audiobook and podcast now. So
yeah.
Music is like
I mean, that's the thing. They're flattening anything with audio is now content. Because frankly, America doesn't value sound. They don't value, I mean, if you've ever been to New York City, they don't care about noise pollution. They don't care about the ears. America's a very visual country. But no, it's up to the consumers now, I think, to define what music means for them, because the artists have done what they can do and the experts don't seem to care.
Yeah, like the thing is like, when it's all like blend and like everything sounds the same, and you have hard difficulty finding good music because there is no more music criticism, there is no more curator, and so you just like out in the field, like like on TikTok, in the web or whatever, like just looking for a record by yourself. Then you really have to like, the only person you can complain to is yourself, because like, yeah, it's true, like as a consumer you let it happen, but also, yeah, the responsibility, there's like a responsibility of like, as you pointed out, of like actor of the music industry, like the media, the theorists, who instead of like finding out alternative, went to like the most like dystopic way of seeing the world and seeing music, and what should be next, what should be the next step. Yeah.
What do you think is like the future of this like streaming economy? Like, I know a lot of my indie artist friends and myself is included, like I don't put my music up on Spotify anymore. Largely because I just don't feel like it belongs there. So my stuff is Bandcamp only. And I know a lot of my other friends are doing that as well. And they're also doing either like one thing on Bandcamp or like one song on Spotify. And then they're selling like a zip file directly on their website of the music. Like, do you think this is something that like a consumer would want? Because like, I still use Spotify. There's people in the comments saying that they still use Spotify because it's an amazing music discovery tool. Like for the consumer, it's a fantastic tool. It's easy to use. Like it gives you everything you want. It literally spoon feeds you the music that you like. And people are lazy and they don't want to go.
Sure.
So do you think that people would ever get up to the point where they're like, no, I'm going to buy the music? Because like I buy music because I'm a DJ, but like would the average person go buy it anymore now that it's no longer physical media and you're just paying for a file?
No, I mean, I can't imagine anyone buying anything that's been free for the last 10, 20 years. And it's funny, I was actually listening to, I'll poke at Matt Dreihers again and Holly Herndon. I was listening to his Interdependence podcast, funny name for what he's been doing with it. But he was giving a talk with, what is this dude's name? Let me like search really quick. But he had a guest on there that was talking about ownership, Jesse Walden, who is a founder investor of the venture capitalist firm Variant. And he has been in music maybe a little bit longer than I have, and he's worked at Red Bull Music Academy, Boiler Room, Spotify, and also created a startup to manage artists such as Solange, Dev Hines, and which I thought was interesting. So he has the exact same amount of experience as, or a length of time that I've been in it. So this like turn from the old music industry where people would kind of buy stuff, but maybe would like download free MP3s, and this like streaming platform industry. And what I noticed is that he described his childhood, which was a bit before that, early 2000s, as a time where him and a bunch of other presumably white males would sit online and pirate music. They would pirate all sorts of content. They would go and download movies. They would download, stuff for free. And he openly admitted that he's like, yeah, I never really valued music or culture. It's just something that me and my band of pirates will go and pillage. And so now he's starting a platform, a venture capitalist firm called Variant, which is designed to, after he built 2 different companies to manage artists and then close, he's starting a startup now that is working to use blockchain to understand ownership or to own ownership itself. So
on the topic of ownership, like, you know, everyone's talking about NFTs now as this like new wave of like artist ownership and giving artists rights. I mean, you know, in the beginning, literally a week ago, I was like, oh my God, it's so cool. And then like reading some more about it, I was like, this is ridiculous. And you're right. I can't imagine anyone paying like thousands of dollars for something that's been free for so long. And like myself being a musician, it took me a really long time to realize that music has value, right? Like as opposed to me going on LimeWire when I was 13 and like downloading a bunch of Soulja Boy songs. Which you would get inevitably because his marketing strategy was to put the songs up under different names, which honestly genius and ahead of his time. But yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think about NFTs? Like, do you think they're going to change things? Like a lot of people are saying how they're so disruptive, and I just don't think that I believe that anymore. What do you think?
Yeah, the NFT discourse. So like there's two things behind it. Like there's the fact that the blockchain and discussion around the blockchain been going on for a while now, and the thing that people behind that technology are like those like libertarian who have this fantasy of like decentralized financialization, and so like the thing is like it's really naive to think that if you put like if you like plug yourself into that ecosystem, this is the solution into like music ownership and like solving the financial hardship of musician and like being like a channel of revenue for musicians. The thing is like, yes, like some people are making money out of it, but like for there's like people who can pay their rent out of it, but there's also the people who make the real money out of it and who are literally people who already are wealthy, because like the biggest sales are famous people. They are like Paris Hilton, Grimes, who is married to Elon Musk. So
Grimes is a funny one though.
Yeah, true.
Actually, there's an analog to her that, sorry to cut off. There's
No.
That's a funny little hitch there that I should point out. So Grimes is on 4AD, same record, or was on 4AD, same record label as Holly Herndon. They got signed around the same time. And 4AD is within the Beggars group that owns Rough Trade, and effectively also another record labels inside of Beggars group is XL, who discovered and signed Adele. So I was working at a Barnes & Noble on the Upper East Side a few years back when the second Adele album came out. And there were these guys in black suits that would come in, and they would come up to me and like other like people in the store, and particularly in the music section, and they would question us on our thoughts on the new Adele record. And they gave us a bunch of CDs, and basically we were to play Adele at certain times at different times throughout the day. And there was a giant standee that we had to put up of Adele. One day, a nice waspy Upper East Side white woman and her friends came in, and they were going through the cookbooks. I was working in the psychology/cookbook/art section, and they came over, lovely people, like looking through their cookbooks. And the one woman goes, "Wow, is this the new Adele? This is so good." Kind of like Deborah from like Everybody Loves Raymond or something. And it's, I watched that, and it's, the thing is, Adele, though she was fun, those people in the suits came from Sony Records. So Adele was not signed to Sony. Sony was funneling cash into XL to up Adele's career so that she could win these Grammys, and creating kind of an alternate, like, kind of stimulating the economy. And that's what we're getting with Grimes as well, is this like kind of, with her being with Elon Musk, there's a kind of stimulant to her independent career that allows her some creativity and open possibilities that are not available to everyone else.
And she also already come from wealth, right? Even though she have like this storytelling of like being a starving artist. She already come from wealth, and then like she associates with her with like heavy wealth, because like we're talking about billions. And then she has like this sense of like post human world, accelerationism, blah blah blah. And then she sells this NFT. She makes like, how much she sold that NFT?
Was it 23 million?
Grimes?
Yeah, 20.
Yeah, how much was it? Was it like 10 million?
No, I think it was like 9 million. I don't think it was like at such a high amount.
Yeah. But the thing is, she's on was on an independent record label, which is the key here, is that, yeah, she's wealthy, but she didn't get a leg up technically, if you look at the way the game has been structured. And this is what these like sort of...
That was 6 million.
6 million? Okay, that sounds so bad. I mean, Kanye said on Joe Rogan... Yeah, I mean, but Kanye said on Joe Rogan that he could buy Universal Music Group for 33 billion, and he can. And so I saw someone ask, what's the alternative to NFTs? That's it. Kanye West buying Universal Music Group is the one alternative we have. Because the thing is, you asked earlier also, Sofie, if, is there any money left? You're seeing what the money is going towards. It's towards Grimes. Grimes is doing some heroic, terrible, terrifying work right now of going, hey, mainstream society, here's some NFTs. Like, here's the future. But the same thing with Kanye, the same thing with Beyonce with the Peloton. These are the independent artists. Everyone else are kind of, to be crude, I would say that we're the underclass. I own my master's because I signed to Planet Mu, like a record label in the UK, and I did that purposely and did not try to participate in the American music industry. But also Planet Mu is kind of like underneath the same UK money laundering structure that is like Beggars Group and like these other, or like Warp Records or so, that can get their artists into winning Grammys and competing in the American market. So the alternative actually still lies within the hands of what you all consider to be the wealthy few, but in the neoliberal context, and again, I'm not a neoliberal, I just follow the game. In the neoliberal context, they are the Randian leaders that slayed all the dragons. Like Kanye literally went through for 10 years, slayed all the dragons. Everyone made fun of him, but sure, he slayed all the dragons, and now he's like a multi-billionaire sitting in his castle in Wyoming going, will I buy the music industry today or tomorrow? And unfortunately, like I said, we had 10 years, and I think we're seeing what the money's going towards now. And it's, to use someone like Dave Chappelle as an example, and being able, like him telling his, actually, I won't use him, I'll use Anita Baker, because she needs it right now. Anita Baker, a Detroit artist, a brilliant singer with one album ever, and that's the only album that matters ever. She asked people the other day to not stream her music because she's not making the money from it. That's where we are right now. It's deciding how to help Anita Baker directly. Not even me. It's how do we help someone like Anita Baker, who has had decades of investments in this scam?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's plenty of artists that have come out and against streaming and like wanted to not be part of it. I remember when Spotify first came out, Taylor Swift was very adamant and not putting her music on there. I know that maybe I'm like misremembering this, but I know that Azealia Banks maybe recently said not to stream her debut anymore because she wasn't making any money off it, and that the label had totally screwed her. Like the fact that artists are coming public with these conversations against streaming like makes me think maybe things are going to move in a different direction eventually, because so many large public faces are being like, no, this is not the way for me. But then on the other hand of that, it's like, well, you're already a very rich celebrity. Why should I feel bad for you? Well,
and that's the thing. It's the investment. It's literally the future investment for generations to come. Do you want there to be a stable music industry? And that's the question. Do you want there to be a stable music industry where we experience music like we always have for like since 1952, when, you know, the recording industry of America was founded? Or do we redefine it entirely and listen to music differently? Or do we not care about music at all? We're kind of at this crux right now. And to be frank, it seems like everyone shows, I don't give a shit about music.
No.
That seems sometimes too, like, because
I care.
It seems like music's just made for like commercials and stuff now, or like workout playlists. Like it seems like music for a purpose, not music for like, you know, self-expression or something. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Sorry, I didn't hear.
I was just saying that like sometimes it feels like, you know, DeForrest said people don't really care about music, and like sometimes I feel like that too. Like music is made just for commercials. Music is made for a purpose. Like it's made for the Peloton exercise bike like workout playlist.
I mean,
go ahead.
No, let me ask you this then, because I know that a lot of us come, like the three of us come from like a clubbing context. Would you listen to that music without the clubs? I think that's the question we have to ask.
Yeah, for me it depends, because like, but it's not really a good answer, because it's like it's also like using music for a purpose. So I will listen to club music, a certain kind of club music, if I need to write and I need to be put into a zone, right? So I'll listen to like, I don't know, a basic channel or whatever. So like it's really functional, but to listen it like as like I will put it at home, I will not listen to that. I mostly like listen to music from the 70s or the 80s for
so the back catalog stuff.
Yeah. So for easy listening at home, but like if I listen to club music, then it will be functional. It will be either to work, or it's either like, I don't know, like after the pandemic end, having a house party. But I will not listen to electronic music for the sake of listening to electronic music, right?
I mean, I think we have our answer then, because I mean, I'll say this: when I found techno through this Alvin Toffler book, The Third Wave, and I found out that Juan Atkins, when he was inventing it, had read that book, took the word techno in 1979, 1980, and was like, you know what, he had been listening to a bunch of funk music that his dad had been curating in Detroit in the time that Motown had left Detroit from 1972 until, so when Juan was making this music isolated, or also with this Vietnam vet who was like defending a COINTELPRO lab in Vietnam and had collected a bunch of like world music and was like feeding this to 19-year-old Juan Atkins, he was thinking about the idea of music opening up stuff in your mind. And there was no dance floor. It was like just theater, like sounds for your mind. And, you know, it's funny, when I first started listening to techno, I was driving delivery trucks and working on in factories. And it made so much sense to me to be driving a forklift while listening to techno, but also to be driving. And that's something I've thought a lot about as, you know, I've been writing this book on the history of it and the history of Detroit as this like industrial city of the future that completely failed because of the exact same conversation we're having about music. I mean, Motown, Ford industry all collapsed in because of this inflated stock, this lean production where they were trying to determine how a city would use materials versus creating actual infrastructure. Actually, there's a book about that Henry Ford commissioned, or the Ford Foundation commissioned, called City is the Future. And this was written in the 70s or 60s, and it was meant to fix stuff like, you know, racial upheaval in the cities. It was meant to, you know, talk about all the different infrastructural problems of a city built for cars, and not for people, particularly Black people that had migrated up north after having, you know, their homes, like in my neighborhood in Enid Ridge, Birmingham, Alabama, that was bombed over 50 times by the KKK and the FBI. You know, leading up to the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing, you have these workers in this city that is designed for technology that is temporary, that has no like real economic material lifespan. And, you know, I think he saw something. I think Juan Atkins really saw something when he read that book in a class called Future Studies and was trying to make funk music. He was trying to consolidate these 20-member funk bands into a single, like into his Korg MS-10 and like Roland 808 or whatever. And I think the thing he particularly saw is that there was no value in teamwork. And that's part of the reason techno got shipped off and sold to Europe and split in all sorts of different ways, along with the existing musics that were there. But I know, I mean, if we have to think about music in terms of styles and in this utilitarian way versus what it means to us in our history and like our lived experiences, environments, I think everyone's made a decision. Because I'll say this, one thought to make new music, not to listen to other music. And I think that's a really, that inspiration to create is something that's really, I don't know, it's invalidated at this point, I feel, as a person who's making music. And like, I look at my Bandcamp or whatever every day and go, you know, is this even worth it? When I read like a Pitchfork review and they can't hear that I'm using like a VR sound plugin that, you know, plays a sound like literally in like stereophonic dimensional channels, and the guy at Pitchfork goes, oh, repetitive beats. And I go, oh, well, has he ever made a track with Maximus P? Probably not. When I think about that kind of stuff, I think everyone's making a decision, and we kind of have to go either decide if we're going to go the other way and start listening to music differently, listening to music and making music differently, or we can stop complaining about the future
and just go with it. I think you're right to say that sometimes music feels invalidated. Like, something that I wanted to bring up, but we didn't get a chance to yet, was the issue of race. I know that you wrote a really fantastic article for Dweller several months ago about how like techno is Black music, and we know that, but like so many people for some reason thinks it comes from Berlin, and Berlin is like this birthplace of techno where all this stuff happened, and how like now techno and dance music is completely dominated by like cisgendered white male DJs, when where it came from was like Black queer communities. And we're seeing a lot of Black artists commodified in the music industry, I think. I guess on the cover of like Spotify playlists, but not represented in staff at all.
Oh, a perfect example of that is Momoready, actually. Nice, I like him a lot as a person.
Great.
He's a very emotional person, and that's really important in a time like this. But I use Apple Music, I should disclose. I use Apple Music because Apple owns hardware. And so when Spotify is finally, like Spotify doesn't even own the servers it's using. So when Spotify finally gets caught in its money scam and money laundering scam, you know, Apple Music will be there with its hardware. It's a monopoly, but you know, Ted Nelson, one of the early inventors of the internet, once said, when I met him in 2013, he said, you know, I'm not going to knock Mac because it's a tool. It's a tool to get access, and it's the most stable tool. And as soon as I'm done using this tool, I'll take them out too. But that's kind of how I feel about Apple at this point. But yeah, yeah.
I don't use Apple Music. I think it's so ugly.
It's so ugly.
I know. I just have such a visual problem with it, and I think that's where Spotify like really got me.
I'm deleting it soon. I got a hard drive and an Apple iPod Classic.
But yeah, the solution is not only like Spotify or Apple Music or Tidal or whatever. It's like you shared with me that article of Liz Pelly about a case for universal music access, like the national, like socializing streaming and like using, like, for example, it was wrote for an ID for America, like the American Music Library, and like having like kind of streaming service publicly run. But before this kind of thing happened, and like in order like to implement this kind of tool, we have to have like a whole like ideological shift, not only in the US but like everywhere, like same in Europe. I think like in Europe we are more like shy to implement alternative and think that we are able to implement them, but like we still like under this like neoliberal ideological shape. So yeah.
I can't find the book right now, but this reminds me of this book from Benedict Anderson, Imagined Communities, on like nationalism. And I realized I didn't finish the point about Momoready to tie this all into what you were just saying, John. But when I got on Apple Music a few months ago, I saw Momoready's face right next to Drake's. And I was like, man, Momoready doesn't make the kind of money Drake makes. Yeah. And I just sat there and like stared at that. And I felt, I didn't know what to feel about that. Because I was happy for him, but at the same time, you're just like, whoa. And the thing about Europe, I've been making work through the European art circuit for a while. And I think it's really interesting because, for one, Europeans pay on time. For two, they talk about money up front, which Americans will not ever talk about money up front. And also, you guys have these like beautiful nationalist ornaments. I did a residency at the KW Kunstwerk of contemporary art in Berlin a few years ago, and like was living inside of it for a month, and was just like, whoa, there's an apartment inside of this museum that's walled off, and the walls still have the bullet holes from World War II in them. Yeah. And I was just like, wow, this is like a thing that has, you know, a good like analog to that would actually be in New York. We have the Whitney Museum, which was started by Gertrude Whitney, the distant cousin of Eli Whitney, who invented the cotton gin, which optimized past Black slave labor in the Black Belt. So funny little connection there. This money laundering scheme of the Whitney, which has a new building and meatpacking district that was designed by the guy that designed the New York Times building, is literally like selling, like one of their board members they fund the companies that designs and builds the gas, like the sort of gas chemicals that's used in pepper spray and used inside of the tear gas that the police would use on protesters, and like weapons dealings. And it just, there's all of this like dirty money here that I sincerely hope that Europe as a cultural, I don't like to use the word nationalists, despite having an album called Black National Sonic Weaponry, but you have to section that off in America. But in Europe, like I hope for this, I'll keep saying with a soft N, this nationalism around culture and around what the history that's there, because that's the thing that's going to save all of this, I think, is like, a European Union of recorded music.
Yeah, like you mean like the particularity in like the protection of like culture that each country have, like France or Germany, or like France, we have like this thing called like Statut des intermittents du spectacle, where if you're a cultural worker, but you have to make a certain amount of work of you have to make a certain amount of gigs, so it's like still a privileged position. But if you have like, and they're trying to of course Macron is trying to cut this thing, but like if you have a certain amount of work, then the state pay you for the time that you don't work as a cultural worker. So it's a special status. It's not unemployment, it's something else. This kind of like thing, or how like, for example, in France, books are like partially funded by the state. So we have like books where the prices are capped. So it's not like, it's like sometimes like I buy import from America, and like the small hardcover will be $20, which is like the normal price of a book in North America, I guess. So like this kind of like small thing, it's kind of like, I guess, soften and like kind of like would say like kind of like make this kind of accelerationism doesn't go that fast in Europe, but it's still
going.
happening though. Yeah, it's going.
It's going, and it's no, that's something I remember sitting in the office with one of the accountants at the KW who was talking about, very nice lady, but she was talking about this kind of creative entrepreneurship she was wanting to bring into the museum, and I looked her dead in the eyes and was just like, don't do that, like don't like no, like that's how Nazism happens, like stop right there, like stop, like like right there. I mean, you know who's also has a good alternative that we haven't talked about, and I mostly don't care about it, which is why I haven't brought it up. Because I think but this is probably the best route for America, it would maybe horrify you, is K-pop. They removed all their music from Spotify about a week ago and built their own streaming service, which is the most brilliant thing they could have done. And then they threw BTS at the Grammys.
No, that's great. That's good. That's a good point you like pointing out. Like in Northeast Asia, there's really like, it's like how you said, like this particular protection who is like, it's like based on nationalism and they're like your cultural thing. So like, for example, most of Japanese record labels don't have their stuff on Spotify. And people, also like it's a particular market. People still buy physical CDs, but it's also because they understand that it's a scam. And also the fact that also like, for example, Avex Track, one of the biggest Japan record label, which will be the equivalent of Universal, who invested all those millions into their pop star. They don't want to earn like the pennies that Spotify throw at record label, and they don't have like the special relationship that Universal have with Spotify neither. Yeah. So there's no reason for them to be in there in the first place. But I didn't know like that the K-pop record label was on Spotify and then they took over. So that was interesting.
They That's just really interesting. It's really interesting. I actually laughed out loud when I saw it because it's such a chess move.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like they're able to do that because K-pop is like, you know, a multi-million-dollar industry. Like the artists in the world can't band together and do that. That's why so many people, like everybody has to rely on Bandcamp, right? Because at least that's a platform. Like I mentioned, like I have some friends that sell, you know, a zip file off their website, but like maybe with 10 sales off that, right? Versus Bandcamp where it has a discovery tool where like other people can go find your music. Like, yeah, by nature, all these platforms are exploitative, but it kind of seems like Bandcamp would be the best option right now, right?
Yeah, Bandcamp is the best option. I actually did an essay recently with my partner where we quoted Bandcamp's, I think the guy's name is Ethan Diamond, the CEO. He compared Bandcamp to Etsy, which I thought was really cute and sweet. That, you know, it's, yeah, I mean, whereas Spotify literally is fighting with, they're literally fighting with Apple Music right now for two reasons. One is that they have like Apple, the App Store sells Spotify. It's the thing that gets you to people. And so Apple's like, whenever you finish making your millions, we'll take it. The other thing is that people don't realize this, and this is very important, but the word podcast is borderline copyrighted by Apple. And it stands for iPod broadcasts. So like Spotify can make all the money off of podcasts that they want, and Apple probably in about 5 to 10 years will sue them and take all the money back.
For all of it.
And I mean, business is modern warfare, and America's not a country. It's a economic warship that sends all sorts of money laundered missiles across the world to overthrow governments and create fake music to trick the entire world to participating inside of a music industry instead of listening to free and open music. And yeah, I mean, Bandcamp is probably the best option because it is a free market that is so far untainted by venture capitalism and algorithmic logic. But the other thing is, I mean, going back to that earlier statement of like, you know, we have to rethink how we listen to this music. You know, it's been really interesting writing this book on techno and like literally sitting on Discogs every day and going through every single techno like track ever released in Detroit and just like going through them and looking the people up and like basically living with these people. It's and it got me thinking a lot about my listening habits over the last 10 years, which was basically PR companies sending me emails of free music every day since I was in college. Like the way that I would try to pay it forward with artists was to write about their music at NPR, Resident Advisor, or whoever else. But yeah, I think there has to be there's a term for this. We say ideological shift, but it's a Copernican turn where we have to actually look at music and go, do we care if this exists tomorrow? Because to be really frank right now, music as we know it will not exist in 5 years.
We're gonna have like AI music like Grimes predicted?
Oh, that's too lucky. That's too optimistic.
Yeah,
you see NFT art. It's literally gonna be like 5-second like songs by some dude in Idaho. Like it's like 100 gex. It'll just be like.
I like 100 gex.
I know.
I feel I should be attacked, but I know.
No,
I think the crazy thing about
no.
hydrogex, so like this is a total aside, but like there are people out there being like, hydrogex is the craziest thing that's ever happened to music.
It
There's
is.
nothing that's ever sounded like this. And I'm like, you guys, like, there's crazier things.
Well, it's the Beatles.
That calls to my like old millennial nostalgia on the gex.
Oh my god. Yeah, no, I mean, that's the point I was trying to bring up really with Arcade Fire, was if you notice that was one of the last bands to win Album of the Year. And part of the reason they couldn't make it is because you can't have 20-member bands like, releasing albums every year and splitting up the cash. Grizzly Bear, like the very next year, released an article on Stereo Gum being like, we can't eat because there's like 5 of us. And that's where the DJ economy comes into all of this, where a DJ basically doesn't own any of the music they're playing, and they ought to be, for every set that they're playing, paying royalties from every single track played in a night, as a kind of living human algorithm, which is what the last 10 years of the dance music industry was. It was a PR campaign drummed up by the 20-year anniversary of the Love Parade and the second Summer of Love. And all the DJs that existed across the last 10 years are all, they were Spotify algorithms more or less for Mixmag, for Resident Advisor, for DJ Mag, and all these other magazines that wanted to refinance 30-year-old copyrights like Kevin Saunderson, like these, like Richie Hawtin, these old, musicians. So, I mean, there's a full shift that kind of has to happen here, where we really have to maybe ask a different question and go, okay, how do we keep music going? Like, how do we ensure that Drake actually releases another piece of music, which I know he released a 4-track EP of like very middle of the road, even more bland than usual trap music. But
Thank you.
I mean, Drake is a Spotify algorithm. That's his whole, like,
Sure.
He is an algorithm.
Drake makes like very calculated choices in both his like endorsements and his like social stuff, and also in his music. Like the music comes when he feels himself like dropping a bit, and like he pushed back that album on purpose. Like he's a businessman, I think, more than anything.
Business is modern warfare, and music is the collateral.
I think like something to think about back in like to music having purpose and stuff is like, do people actually like music, or do they just like being told what to listen to? Like we talked about before, the Spotify algorithms, like the release radar. Like I've been a very early Spotify user. I hopped on it really, really early when it first came out because, I was buying CDs for $10, and to have all the music I wanted for $10 a month, I was like, I can't believe it. It changed everything for me. And so having this music of like given to me by Release Radar, like made things so easy, made things so comfortable. I think, we got to figure out if people actually want to look for music. Do they want it, or do they just like being told what they like? Like these playlists exist for a reason. Now people are not even trying to get PR campaigns. They don't care about blogs. They care about getting on these Spotify curated playlists. And like, we don't even know if a human being is making these.
Well, that's kind of funny. Okay, so there's a question in the chat that I'll combine with this, because it's a kind of a funny point. Yes, Detroit techno was Black cis male, not dominated, because it was a small group of dudes. It actually, there was no, that's kind of the saddest thing I've realized about techno, is that they were all nerds. They were incels. One Atkins didn't have any friends. That's like, I mean, he had Kevin Saunderson in them, but you could see like it was mostly Juan by himself in his room dreaming up fantasy worlds with a 30-year-old like Vietnam vet who then lost his mind and is now reciting Henry VIII plays like in his apartment somewhere. So it's, I should actually say that, and that's part of what's interesting about techno in relation to this sort of question that you've asked, Sofia, like what do people even listen to music for? It's a thing where those cis males that you're pointing at, they were making comic books in their minds. That's what they were listening to music for. All of them were cis males, and they were about, I count 4 women entirely in the first and second wave. One was Yolanda Reynolds, another was Bridget. I forgot her last name, but yeah, Bridget, and then there was Paris Gray, who was in Inner City, and then I guess you can count Yvonne Turner, who was over in Chicago House. The thing is, Chicago House is completely separate from Detroit techno in every possible way. Techno started first in 1979, 1980. House music started in 1985 when Derek May stole a drum machine, an 808 drum machine from Juan Atkins and sold it to Frankie Knuckles, which is how Frankie started making his first tracks. So that solves that mystery. And then very next year, in 1986, the House Sound of Detroit, or the House Sound of Chicago, was released in a compilation over to the UK, which sparked the Second Summer of Love. The Techno, the New Dance Sound of Detroit was released in 1988 and was the thing that really, I guess, blew up. And the word techno was applied to everything across all music in Europe for some reason for the next few years. Whereas in Detroit, it was still being called progressive music. So anyway, I say that to say it wasn't cis male dominated because there were no women in sight, because they were nerds. And this is a key thing to think about, is that when I talk about Detroit techno, I'm talking about an isolated culture that is influenced by a large breadth of history. Like, they were listening to more than just Kraftwerk. That was like one of the many things that was being played on the radio. Zapp and Rogers, another thing. Anita Baker was around. I mean, you have the entire Motown sound going on. And I mean, Detroit had a music scene that started in 1920, and that Alice Coltrane and Miles Davis, Charlie Parker, Elvin Jones, like, they were all in these jazz scenes. And then a highway was built over the neighborhoods where that music was, and that disrupted that scene. And then Motown refinanced it. And then the race riots happened in 1967, which made Motown close down and move to LA, which basically killed the music industry. So Juan and them were by themselves. Juan did not know Frankie Knuckles because he was a bit of a homophobe and was like, I don't want to go to Chicago and like and do the queer dancing thing. And I think he really missed out on a career because of that. So I wanted to say that, but what I found in this isolatory, I'll call it stationalism, where they were like really into the state of Michigan and really into the city of Detroit. There's a music history that is deep and firm there, that when I talked to DJ Holographic, yesterday, she was able to walk me through that whole history and to be like, oh, my dad, hung out with Mad Mike from Underground Resistance. They grew up the street from each other. I have the same birthday as Juan Atkins. I'm like, I can walk past Motown and there's all these relics. And that's something I've experienced in Alabama, where my grandfather owns the house of this dude named John T. Fess Watley that more effectively invented the first Black orchestras, the first Black music that was formalized and toured around the country. And he would send up musicians from my neighborhood in Alabama up to people like Duke Ellington, who would then put them in this bands and then go over to France and all these other places and spread this like American jazz music. And my town was like the factory for this stuff, in relation to Detroit, where they would all kind of gather for the stretch of time. But I bring all that up to say that that kind of long thread of somewhat nationalist history is maybe what is necessary to see. I should add this in there. So the guy who my grandfather owns the house of, he taught Sun Ra, and Sun Ra is from Birmingham, Alabama, and he spread his whole message of like Afrofuturism and all that stuff from my neighborhood through Chicago, over to Detroit, through New York, down to Philly, over to Europe. And he like, did his whole like thing where he would like have his band, which he got the idea from T. Fess Watley, and he would unformalize it from this military structure like Watley and make it this spiritual thing where he would, while conducting, point at like a sousaphone and say, give me your sound, and the sousaphone would just like spit out a sound, and he would point at the trumpet, and a trumpet would give Sun Ra his sound. And there was no composition. It was just Sun Ra literally orchestrating these people in a communal family manner. And then he would march them out of the venue and march the entire crowd out into the streets and be like, okay, concert over. We've all marched together in solidarity. And so when I think about the music industry separately from this Birmingham jazz context that I come from and was taught and raised in since I was a kid, and my dad was raised in, and I can just keep going down this family line, I can genuinely say I don't know if people like music, because I can't really I don't hear these kind of narratives when I talk to people across the world about music sometimes. Quite a bit in actually Iran. There's a lot of Iranian musicians like Eda Akbar, who performs as Sot. he's an interesting figure that left Iran when he was younger, moved to Berlin, discovered electronic music, moved to San Francisco for a bit, discovered what was happening over there, and then took it back to Iran and was trying to make electronic music formalized for his community in Tehran. And there's a record or a cassette he put out on Opal tapes called The Hardcore Sounds of Tehran, where he like tried to stitch together a sound of Tehran that he could like give to his people who could not go clubbing because clubbing's like illegal.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and it is really, he's a really sweet person, and that story like makes me cry sometimes because it's because no, he did a pilgrimage and took this music back to his people, and unfortunately, I mean, I think that's what's gonna have to be necessary for this is for, I mean, again, if we're asking if people like music, the answer is probably no, because it's all fake.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think you're maybe right on like suggesting, I don't know, forgive me if I misunderstood, but like focusing on more like localized music. I think especially after COVID, we're going to see a lot of like, you know, big local focus. Like right now in Canada, like we can't tour, obviously we can't tour in the States as well, dance music, like we can't go to Europe. It leaves us nothing but our own communities. And I guess my hope throughout this whole thing is that people are going to look at their own communities for music and make it real, not fake. Like make real music.
Yeah, together, and to participate and love it together.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. On this, DeForrest on Iranian music, I also advise Persian electronic music, 1966-2006 by Alireza Mashayekhi. I'm gonna put it on the chat.
Oh, cool.
He's like one of the early FM synthesis guy from Iran. I'm writing an article on him soon for Dweller, so I'm really excited to have him in the mix soon. I'll put the link.
Yeah, please. I mean, this is what's I think important as we have these conversations about music is really tying together that. I mean, reading music reviews and writing about music for a long time and having to deal with editors that have no understanding of, I mean, actually Carly Busta from New Models, who you did a talk with recently, she wrote an article for Document Journal a few weeks back that asked, is counterculture like even like real anymore?
Oh yeah, I read that one.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't know, Carly, we hung out in Berlin together and like you were hanging out with like rappers, like teenage rappers at like a Berlin club, and you like were the editor-in-chief of like Art Forum or whatever in the 90s. I don't know. I don't think you could ever know what counterculture is. And that's the thing. We have to get these technocrats and experts out of conversations of what family and nationhood means and start defining it for ourselves. We shouldn't allow Daniel Ek, a Swiss man who's more or less trying to get in on American like intellectual properties and make money off of like unstable servers. You know, we should not allow him to determine what and how we receive and discover music. So no, thanks for sending this, John, because this is a different way to think about it. Like for one, it's like, where did these instruments come from? I mean, they're all,
The thing is like, it's like, as you said, like technocrats shouldn't be like the one like leading the conversation and putting like, you know, like being the voice that they have to be heard, but like there's something like lying, like which is like underlying over all this. It's like the fact that the Californian ideology, the Silicon Valley kind of everybody will be both hip and rich because of technology, because of the information technology kind of thing. Really like did a number on like everybody like kind of like way of seeing the world, and also like within government and stuff. So there's like, it's like when we talk about like what we want about music, what is music, and like there's like this thing underlying of like, okay, from which point of view we're talking about, right? It's like like, do you adhere to the Californian ideology and you just want to, I don't know, like be cool and make money, be hip and rich, like they say in 1995. So yeah, there's this thing, and like also like how rich it is that this NFT thing got pushed when we have all this talk about climate collapse, and there is like this underlying thing of like mining costs a lot of like it does a lot of number in terms of electricity consumption and whatever. So it's like how rich it is when we have this conversation about racial inequality and so on all that summer, and then okay, let's put the white cis male tech bro up front and make them lead the conversation on what should be the future of music.
I mean, I guess it's the first time that as individual, like as citizens, we've ever had to acknowledge that maybe, I mean, it's the thing that Adam Curtis is always saying, right? That there's darker forces lying underneath our false democracies. And like, maybe for the first time, we have to admit that the colonizers not only won, they won, they ran victory laps, they wrote many books about it. Like all these books are white men, except for this one, Caliban and the Witch. This is by a woman.
Oh yeah, Federici, I'm reading it.
Yeah, no.
Give us a reading
She's so
list
important.
after.
Yeah,
she's so important. Like, my God, she's important. But it's because yeah, it's what we're getting at ultimately is about the instrumentalization of human labor and humans as machines to produce things, and it's oof,
Yeah.
my God.
I think, we only have a few minutes, like 20-ish minutes left. I think it's a good time to jump into
There's a long
Q&A.
question here.
Oh my God.
There is a long question. I'll read it out loud.
Yeah.
Or Tom, if you want to unmute yourself and read it, say it yourself, you're more than welcome to do that as well.
Yeah,
But if
pass
not,
them
I
off.
will read it. The way per play royalties function feels especially hostile to longer playing music. We have composers breaking up their compositions into smaller tracks to maximize plays now, but that means listeners algorithmically stumble into more substantial pieces from what might be reluctantly intended access points at best. There's precedent for that in radio, but at least that has entire stations and programs dedicated to longer playing music, and it's scheduled so listeners can tune in accordingly. Streaming should free up more substantial works from physical media running length limitations. John brought up that socialized streaming article Liz Pelly wrote about bringing streaming music to public institutions like libraries. Are any of you aware of other alternative proposals within streaming?
It's a long question. Do you want to start, DeForrest?
Yeah, and Ivan will get to you after that for sure.
Yeah. The most immediate alternative I can think of is a website called Resonate. That is kind of a co-op, co-owning streaming service that I sort of—
I heard about that.
Yeah, I interned for it a little bit when it was beginning. Yeah, it's basically streaming, but kind of like Bandcamp, but I guess more decentralized than Bandcamp. Yeah, I mean, the real question here, I think, is, again, we kind of come back to what is music. Because I mean, radio is a very different format than vinyl, and they've made it work. But I mean, I think the thing is, music exists in a lot of different forms that are not compatible until now, and now we just have content.
Yeah, yeah, and someone brought up like they don't know anyone using it on the listener side. So yeah, there's this question of adoption, and like it's always this kind of thing with like alternative. It's like there's like this interesting idea, this alternative, and then, but it's it's like it's this question of resources. It's like, of course, the people who have money, they are able to do those cool stuff with amazing UX and UI and so on, and people who have less resources, they do stuff with less resources, so it looks a little bit less beautiful, and also it's less adopted to the masses, because there is not a huge a peer campaign behind. So like, yeah, it's this kind of like question. Like, I believe alternative can be efficient, and I believe that alternative are publicly backed can be efficient, but also in order to do this, you have to have like a change of paradigm in the sense of like, we can't ask, for example, a government who went through like austerity politics and years, like destroy everything of like what makes them efficient because of ideology, and then expect them to be efficient, right? So it's like there's a lot of work to do in that sense, and also like educating I don't know, like people within the left to have like, I don't know, to be more tech savvy, I will put it, as like, to put it simply. So yeah, like you can't like expect like a platform as Resonate to be broadly adopted within, I don't know, 2 years or 3 years, when they don't even have like 1% of the resources that platform like Spotify has.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think that's like a big problem is like, yeah, you can make all these platforms, but like, who's going to use them? We had another question from Ivan. Do you want to unmute yourself and say it out loud? Go ahead.
Thanks. I'm really happy I came to this talk because, for one thing, I've been listening to so much music business literature, and it's like so frustrating for me because they have the neoliberal paradigm where it's like, you're an entrepreneur, this is the new economy, you have to hustle, get yourself out there. And this talk was like obviously very critical of that. I kind of come from a background of like thinking about the gig economy like Uber and these food delivery apps that market themselves in exactly the same way, I believe. Like, you know, oh, you're your own driver, you're your own courier, we give you jobs, but, you know, you're your own boss, etc. Spotify, to me, is exactly the same thing. They own all the tech, they own all the platform. Us, the workers, being the musicians, we supply our labor to produce this stuff. They make all the money from that, and we're entrepreneurs, when in reality, you know, they're getting all the benefits of our product. So one of the things I think I would like to pick everyone's brain on is just, you know, the idea that we've kind of forgotten is that music is labor. It's not entrepreneurship. I don't really believe we should see ourselves as business people. Obviously, in this neoliberal era, we're kind of made to think that way, but in the fundamental power dynamic as we see ourselves in society, it's just blatantly not true. We're part of the working class. So, you know, what do people think about, like, I'm really interested in this co-op thing. I never heard of this until this person shared it. You know, I think that if we as musicians, as artists and creators want to change things, I'm sick and tired of people thinking like, okay, well, you know, we'll wait for government to step in, like whatever happened in Korea. That's also really interesting. I think we need to take initiative ourselves. So, you know, if musicians and artists and creators actually banded together, created some sort of union that could start on like a local level, move on to like a provincial, state level, federal level, you know, et cetera, that could seize the capacity for music to be produced. And then we, as a collective, decide how it is we want to distribute it. We could have our own streaming service such as this, wherein we're cutting out the middleman because we own the service, right? What do people think of that? Like, personally, I believe that there needs to be some sort of attempt made to show that we are the ones producing this stuff, and we have the capacity to stop producing it if we are not getting our fair cut of the deal.
Yeah.
I want to point out something funny, actually, Ivan. Is that a Keith Haring shirt from the Uniqlo line? So Uniqlo on Fifth Avenue is right across the street from the Museum of Modern Art, where they basically buy properties of art from the museum and then stick them on shirts and then sell them abroad. But about a few blocks away from my house is the 14th Street YMCA, where there is, or I think about 2 years ago, there was a rare Keith Haring mural that was discovered inside of, like, I think one of the bathrooms, because, you know, East Village and back in the day. But yeah, and I think about that a lot. And also Charlie Parker's house is commemorated around the corner from me. And I think that's probably the closest we can get to this is, yeah, it's figuring out these raconteur schemes and like finding it. It's, I don't know.
Yeah, the thing is like, there's like, yeah, there is initiative like this. There's like this campaign, Justice at Spotify, Union of Musicians. Like somebody, I can put the link, but like you mentioned the gig economy, Uber, and all that stuff. We have to also remember that the music industry and music in general, creativity in general, started the gig economy. Because I will quote this book by Pierre-Michel Manger, The Economy of Creativity. It's in English, so I will share the reference afterward. So in order to mobilize the artistic personnel needed to realize an artwork or perform a new show, an art world must have access to a supply of human resources that is far superior to the volume of labor demanded, expressed at any given moment. So it's like, this is why like Paris, New York, London are musical hubs, and this is where all the creative class is. It's because the art world need a supply of artists superior to the volume of labor. And this is stuff that it's like 19th century stuff, 18th century stuff. So it's like it's nothing new. The what is, oh, somebody quoted Anderson. Oh, it's nice. So like what is new is like it's like the layer of technology that we put on that super old stuff and super old paradigm that we need to have all those artists somewhere in order to exploit labor as pleased and have wages as low as possible, because everybody's fighting for the labor. The thing with union and initiative like Justice at Spotify, the thing is like those organizations itself, first, like we have to be vigilant that they are not radical enough, because if you ask like Spotify, that I believe that's the campaign, to be paid 1 cent, right? 1 cent per stream instead of the 0.49 that they're paying.
No, 0.00.
The 0.00 that they are paying. I believe like you're not going hard enough on them, because like what people are asking is fair share of their royalty, not getting paid one cent per stream. It's not gonna, it's like getting paid 1 cent per stream is not gonna help you pay your rent or pay food. So like that's the thing to be vigilant about. Initiative exist, like the one union of musician.org, but we have to push them toward the left.
Yeah, I agree with you. I always thought that like the 1 cent thing was a bit low. Like you want to own your music, you want to make money. Like why are you asking for 1 cent? Why are you still trying to like operate on this platform? I guess was the question that I had for this whole like musicians demand 1 cent. Like first of all, Spotify doesn't care. People are still going to use it. They're not going to give you 1 cent. There was no point in even doing that.
No.
That's why I brought up actually I pointed out the Uniqlo shirt, was to kind of point out a particular trade route that, as John said, is manufactured on the idea of having artists come to New York. Like, New York is not a natural place. They literally, like, the Dutch threw dirt in a lake and built the city. Like, it's an artificial, like, city. And Henry Ford tried to do this as well in the Amazon when he tried to build Fordlandia, or his, like, second city of the future after Detroit was kind of waning a little bit, because, you know, they have to move on to their next scam. But the other thing that's happening in New York when you bring up the gig economy is that I've seen more people delivering packages now than I ever have since I lived here. And it's, you know, I mean, the thing is, what we're asking for, particularly in America, people are asking to, as John said, like, for a piece of the pie when the pie is money laundering. And so it's kind of a, you know, it's, to be quite deathly frank about this, when you go to a country, you know, you murder all the natives and you enslave a bunch of people, make them do robotic-like work, and then you know, dig canals through half of the country, you like overturn all the topsoil in like for thousands of like countries worth of soil, you like overturn it entirely to the point that, like, you know, 100-foot high dust bowls are like, or like dust tornadoes are like flying at you and, like, you know, killing people and suffocating them. And like you're fracking to the point that earthquakes are happening across an entire coastline. We're not dealing with a stable economy and a stable logistics of how to build a sustainable economy. What we're dealing with here is a parasite. And I gave America and I gave the music industry 10 years to figure this out in 2010. I looked at it and said, I'm going to move to New York in 2013 and see how long it takes before everyone goes, like, recognizes that the reason that we're asking these questions now is because, as Sophia, you know, brought up earlier, is there any money left? And I think we have to kind of go back, like, look the other way and go, if you, Ivan, are able to wear that shirt, and I just point you out because, like, that shirt's there and it's kind of a neat example of, like, iconography being, like, literally removed from its context and, like, shuttled across, like, a trade route and inventory line, and, like, just being completely repurposed and rebranded. We kind of have to go backwards with this and go, why do we want this? And then go, okay, what is left of this? And I mean, the only thing I can think of solution-wise is what Kanye has proposed, which is, I'm going to buy a Universal Music Group. And I don't particularly agree with that angle. I mean, he's also trying to build a city out in Wyoming, which is also a smart thing to do, but not, like, the best thing to do. But
I'm building a city right now in Senegal.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Or Wyoming, but also I think also in Senegal, which he should stay away from Senegal. That's wrong. But that's what visionaries in America do. They build these things. I mean, the first libraries in America were funded by Andrew Carnegie. Like, it's all financial ventures. So we kind of have to do a different kind of logic here. Actually, there's a question down there where someone asks about interrogating the people that make these technologies. That's actually part of the reason I'm writing the book I've been writing, is because there's this guy from Tuskegee, Alabama, named Don Lewis. Down in Tuskegee he was in college with my aunt during the Tuskegee experiments, in which the U.S. government, basically paid and forced their way into Tuskegee University to do syphilis studies on Black men specifically, and to inject them with syphilis and then leave them uncured for the remainder of their lives to test and see how long the syphilis would last in their bodies. Well, Don Lewis was not in this study, but he was there, and he was doing a lot of he played like gospel organ and stuff, and would do a lot of rallies with like Martin Luther King and stuff, and later moved to, I believe it was Arizona. No, it was Roswell, New Mexico, because he was a nuclear scientist and studied nuclear science. And while doing that, he began to work with wire bending and started to combine early electronic instruments like the Hammond organ and the Lion drum machine. That was more or less like a metronome. He started grafting these things onto each other. And the guy who supposedly invented MIDI from the Roland Company discovered this guy's like whole big like live electronic orchestra is what he called it, of like multiple electronic instruments like welded together in this like crazy ass fashion before MIDI was even invented. And yeah, immediately the guy like signed a contract with Don Lewis. It's like, give me this technology, show me how you're doing this. And that's where the 808 drum machine comes from. This black man invented MIDI, and the 808, this nuclear scientist, this black man invented the 808 drum machine and MIDI with this Japanese guy. And immediately the US Union of like musicians or whatever tried to sue Don Lewis. They began to picket his shows, and Roland was nowhere to be seen, and Don Lewis packed up all of his gear and quit music. He's now touring and showing those like the relics of that of these instruments. But the point I'm trying to make here is that Roland then from the 80s on began to produce ad nauseum, just like many types of electronic instruments with this man's invention. One of those instruments being the 808 drum machine that Juan Atkins would use to invent techno, and then would be used by, you know, Prince and various songs. And yeah, it's, what I'm trying to say is that we have to get into the nitty gritty copyrights of this stuff. We have to get really into the legal and financial stuff if we want to stop this. And it's about following the money. It's about following the trade route, seeing who sat next to who and who did what. And oh wait, someone wants to ask a question.
Yeah, Erica, you can go ahead and unmute yourself if you want to ask a cue.
Perfect. Here, I'll even put, sorry, I don't know if you can see me or not, my screen. Oh, that's my background today. Hi, thank you for doing this talk. I'm at work, which is why I'm just closed everything off. I wanted to ask a question. When you talk about the legal aspect, I'm just curious what sort of, I know you mentioned copyright specifically, but what sort of legal questions are you interested in asking? I guess the reason why I'm asking is for background. I'm a lawyer and I'm not currently in the music space right now. I'm working in the technology space, but like my goal is to end up working in the music space and helping local artists eventually. So I'm curious to know what sort of legal questions you're hoping to start asking and hoping to have answers to, because maybe that might, you know, guide where I start looking, but just generally, where would be a good base to start asking these questions?
Are you familiar with Rasheeda Phillips? She's Moore Mother's partner, but she's a lawyer and mostly working in real estate and housing in West Philadelphia and helping to win. Sorry, there's a new question. Yeah, that guy did the whole MIDI thing about 5 years after Don Lewis, and they actually filled out that paper or wrote that manifesto and presented it a few blocks down for me on Broadway. Yeah, and like I believe it was like 1985. So yeah, that was, Dan Smith was actually quite late to that technology and got it through Roland. But to answer your question, Erica, or to continue to answer your question, it's a matter of thinking about this maybe as real estate and going, I mean, if you've ever seen that movie, There Will Be Blood, there's that point where Daniel Day-Lewis's character is looking at a map and he's like, what's that? I don't own that. And he's like, I want it. And whatever that thing is, that we want to build tariffs around that and hold it hostage. And that's what Drake does, actually. Drake is he's the most and highest paid musician in the entire music industry. And it's funny that he released that lackluster 4-track album, because he could have held the entire industry hostage, just like the NBA players and the NFL players last summer. But as we saw, Jay-Z ended the NBA strikes, and Barack Obama ended the NFL one. Or maybe it was the other way around. Yeah. But anyway, it's a thing where, like, particularly with sports, like those black men had to hold their bodies hostage and go, you know what? I'm not playing the game until you give out stimulus checks. Like, that's what's going to be necessary here, is to get into the annals of music copyrights and to see, yeah, what isn't owned and what future investments could be made with their money, but also Yeah, I mean, Bandcamp is like actually quite an open property because they don't own any of the music on them, but technically they do. And that's kind of maybe that's someone to sit with. But that kind of goes back actually to the other question, which is why I stopped for a second to talk about this Dan Smith question with music technology or sequencing technology, is that Don Lewis signed a temporary contract with Roland. Therefore, when he gave his idea, his wave jumping, circuit bending, nuclear science, like self-built skill to Roland, he lost that. And when the union came for him, when the American Union, which ironically was pursued by T. Fess Whatley, the guy whose house my great grandfather owned, and that was something that T. Fess Whatley thought the union would be a great thing for Black musicians, as much as he thought music would be a great thing for Black music, like for Black people to find wealth inside of a apartheid state, which is essentially what the Black Belt is. That same union got Don Lewis and started picketing his shows and saying, you can't be a one-man band, because if you are, what are we going to do with the orchestras? What are we going to do with these disco bands? And that's kind of what I was trying to say earlier about Juan Atkins crunching all this music down into single machines. That's not natural. That wasn't supposed to happen. And Don Lewis should have sued the pants off of Roland, Dave Smith, and all these people, but because he's a nice Christian man, he's living very well off in San Jose with his wife, and he's doing fine. But I mean, you can go to the Temptations, you can go to any, like Boots Riley, I mentioned them earlier, like those are the people who did not get their due. And yeah, I would say looking back at these old music industry cases and understanding what it is that you think about also in the Bible, like the idea of God, like reaching into Adam and ripping out his rib and being like, I'm going to create woman, like whatever that is, whatever these parts that the industry want, like I would say we need to block them immediately. But also
there's also you were talking about people who didn't have their due. There's also the fundraise will happen for Adonis. Remember?
Oh, no, for who?
Adonis.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, that's
that's a good example.
Well, what's interesting about that is that was a scammer on the ground. That like what's sad about that situation is that Trax Records didn't even have the money to be owning copyrights and doing that. That was like a local scam that was based off the fact that that was based off the back of Motown and that same type of like logistics. But by the time Motown left Detroit, they leveled up. Like they were suddenly putting out big records by Marvin Gaye. Like Marvin Gaye's What's Going On came out next, and like Stevie Wonder's Inner Visions came out, and they were making big money off of like good music. So Motown for the 70s had a monopoly on good music. And that's kind of what I mean by this. It's Adonis, unfortunately, I mean, it's the same. Actually, Adonis' situation is the exact same as what's kind of going on with RNS and these Dutch labels right now.
Yeah.
Because like, to be a little crude about it, the dance music industry is a Little League's version of the American recording industry. And RNS and these other companies over there should not be having these problems of racism and it's unacceptable because they don't make enough money. And I look at like Mike Paradinas, who runs my label, I look at him and I'm like, you don't make enough money off my music to tell me how to make it. And he's fine with that, and he puts it out however it's put out. But that's our understanding of it, is that his per capita is too low for me to sell myself. And so we work together as like I use his distribution channels, if you will, to put my music and to hack the industry. And unfortunately, when Adonis was coming up, he did not, there wasn't that availability. There wasn't that, this understanding of the trade route, if you will. Yeah, I mean, what's needed are a lot of music lawyers. I think there needs to be a fleet of music lawyers that come in, like the Attorney General in New York right now. I can't remember her name right now, unfortunately, but she's doing the hard work of suing Donald Trump, of suing Amazon, of trying to bust up the Facebook monopolies, like this one woman. And the same thing with Rasheeda Phillips. She's the one woman in West Philadelphia trying to, like, stop both the gentrification, but also the sort of deindustrialization of those areas. And yeah, perhaps maybe we take a break from music. Perhaps we need music business people to get into the nitty gritty stuff and come save us.
We have another question. I know we're a bit over time, so thanks to everyone who is staying. Noy says, could we build technologies that facilitate maybe the organization of musicians, kind of in the vein of Yvonne's question, or any other platform that challenges capitalist structures, because sites like Resonate are trying to fit in this capitalist schema and suffering from the issue of power relations, from Jean's aphorismal quote in the chat.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, you got muted.
Yeah. No, I muted myself. The answer to this is, like, we don't, like I said earlier, ideological shift. So it's like, we don't need more technology. Like it's like this kind of way of, like, seeing a problem and tossing money around it. For example, capital is not an issue right now. Like, I don't remember the number exactly, because it's been a while since I'm not in the startup world, but, like, there's a huge amount of capital. Even right now with the pandemic, like the VC are loaded. Everybody got the money is not an issue, and the technology is not an issue. What's the issue is radical imagination and, like, really, like going out of this kind of, like, Chicago school libertarian neoliberal ideology, and then we can imagine, like, way to kind of resist what's going on right now. For example, refusing wages, like refusing work as a way to resist, or refusing to release. For example, if, like, people stop releasing 1 gazillion record during Bandcamp Day, for example, maybe maybe we can see, like, some change. Telling, like,
it'd be hard to get everybody to do that, though.
Yeah, it will be super hard, but, like, it's an example. And, for example, like, trying to unionize with tenants within your building to refuse to pay your rent. For example, like in Germany, they have this system, like the government said, but only for business, because German government only seems to protect business. They said, like, because of the pandemic, like, the landlord and the business share the risk. So they can write a letter to their landlord and say, oh, sorry, I can't pay the rent because of the pandemic. I'm not making business. I can't pay the rent, and the landlord share the risk with the person. So, like, as like in a personal matter, how it could look like, it's like you unionize with the tenants of the building, of the other tenants of the building, and you guys, like, refuse to pay the rent within your building. And this kind of thing called, like, I think it's, like, called appropriation, who was used, like, during, like, in Italy in the 70s by factory worker. This kind of method, like, for example, when you don't have to participate to the rat race because you refuse to pay your rent or refuse to pay your amenities and refuse wages as well, then there is, like, another power struggle to come at hands, because, like, if you, like, in this kind of grinding and hustle culture nonstop, and then you're like, you are giving, like, a huge surplus of, like, labor to a machine who doesn't care about you, and not only doesn't care about you, but make sure that you can't earn a livable wages, and then you're like selling to this machine after you gave all your surplus of labor, because like people are actually working more than before the pandemic. Then you're like, can we negotiate like a raise, or can we negotiate like another way of conducting business? No, it doesn't work, because
Yeah, it doesn't care.
it doesn't care. They already have the surplus of labor.
Yeah.
And this is why I take the example of Bank Day, because like Bank Day is a surplus of labor, or a surplus of like release happening a certain Friday, and then we're like, oh yeah, can we earn more? No, it's not gonna work.
There's actually there's an analog to this actually that Ivan also brought up earlier with Uber, and we talked a bit about earlier, John. But I mean, what we're kind of seeing and what you're bringing up here is that Uber, for example, does not have to consider its employees in America. I know the UK just like miraculously won that case because Europe is more socialist than America is capitalist. And I really mean that America is capitalist in the sense that you think about what Uber is. It's an app that popped up out of nowhere about 10 years ago. And it's, before that, you had taxi drivers, like hundreds of thousands of taxi drivers, zipping throughout the city of New York, that basically finance their cars, and they're being able to be taxi drivers by getting these near $1 million debt medallions. I mean, it's kind of like the Catholic Church or something like that, where you have this like big ass debt that you owe, the church or whatever. And when Uber comes in and says, "Hey, anyone can turn their car into a taxi," suddenly these Uber or these taxi drivers are looking at negative $1 million, and their entire livelihood's gone, and just this debt, this insurmountable debt that has led to, a few years ago, a guy driving through Times Square, like trying to kill himself by a cop, and like, have the cops like shoot him dead or whatever. The other day we had taxi drivers like blocking like one of the bridges and just like stopping and being like, "Guys, we cannot move on to Uber. We actually cannot. We will die, and our families will die if we move on to Uber." And you know what everyone says? They say, "Oh, I need an Uber somewhere."
Yeah, true.
And so we're in a situation where, I mean, and that's one of the things that the Attorney General in New York is fighting, is a company like Uber that doesn't even have to that doesn't even have to say that you're our employee. That don't even have to claim these people. And so the surplus labor it's just air, just like NFTs. It's just air at this point. Yeah. And
because like the amount of labor, it's not even like, okay, I did this like minimum of labor, and then okay, because they extract surplus anyway, but like the labor given and the wages, like in the case of the gig economy, is like so imbalanced that it's like, what is even labor at this stage? It's like,
well, the music industry we are the taxi drivers, and the NFT people are the Ubers, and hopefully we could stop Uber before they
take over.
Because I mean, in America, there's no public transportation. New York has the best public transportation probably in the country, and it's pathetic. Like it's 100 years old. It's like, I've been on flaming trains before.
So we gotta build public transit then, like.
So yeah, without public, and that's the thing that happened to Detroit. Without public transit, and living in a city designed by some harebrained genius innovator that built a city for cars with no public transportation, and when it collapses, the people are just like, they're just left there.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's weird about Detroit for sure. It's hard to get around. I was there last year, and I know this is like a very literal statement, but like I had to meet a friend somewhere in Detroit.
It's Van who want to comment.
I was like, I'm gonna see how much the Uber is, right? So I was like, oh, okay, it's like a $10 Uber, so it's a 10-minute drive, so it should be like a 45-minute walk. And then I looked it up on Google Maps, and it was like a 2-hour walk.
Oh yeah.
Because these cities are not.
A city?
It's built for workers. It's built for workers who can afford cars and drive to work, and then they drive back home to their little cages. And then they watch their like TVs and their TikToks and listen to music on Spotify. And then they get up and they drive to work again. That's the only thing you can do here. And that's the surplus labor you're talking about, John. This is called lifestyle in America.
Yeah.
This.
Yeah. All right, we got a final comment from Yvonne. Feel free to unmute yourself and join in.
Yeah, I just thought it was really interesting, y'all talking about public transit and how, in a way, that's how I think music should be. And what I mean by that is just, I've always personally actually been very uncomfortable with the idea of music even being a commodity. So, you know, we're talking about like, you know, in the past, in the 70s with Motown, and, you know, now we're in the streaming era. Both of these eras, and on like the whole history of recorded music is the commodification of music. We're forgetting all of human history where music was just part of our culture and it wasn't commodified in the same way. Obviously, you know, playing shows and stuff, that's different. But my point is just that, you know, we've been only in this paradigm for like 100 years. So what I want to say is just that what we as musicians, what I would love is like, I don't really care if anyone buys my music. I don't. Like, what I care about is just being able to survive, making a living doing music, right? And that's where the crossroads is, right? Because we're saying like, oh man, I can't make enough money doing Spotify, therefore it's tough for me to do my music career, right? When honestly it's like, I would much rather be able to live in a society where I don't have to make money from my music being on Spotify or whatever platform, because I live reasonably enough as it is. My music can just go out freely, and I play shows, I play gigs, do that kind of stuff. So, you know, just like, I get, it's not really a question, but like, I really think like, it's thinking like, okay, do we want to have a better Uber for the musicians, or do we want to have public transit for the musicians, where it's like, you know, society pays for that so that everyone can use it and it's reasonably well funded, obviously not in the States and to an extent everywhere else in the neoliberal era, but you know what I'm saying there?
Yeah, it's the UBI question, right? Because but that's why I tackle like also culture and grinding culture, because like if we are in a paradigm where we have to hustle and grind just to be able like to pay rent and eat, then like bringing up the question of UBI is really difficult, because it's like people can't even imagine it, you know. It's so like remote from the experience and the way that they internalize capitalism, that if you like bringing up this question, you have to do a lot of like education for that, and that's why the NFT discourse and the fact that people that like my Dreihers are pushing for NFT is really rubbing me the wrong way, because it's like, instead of like, as you said, creating a better Uber for musicians, why not putting our energy into like educating people, because we are part of society, into like anyway, like work and livable wages is not interlinked. So why not educate people into for being alive, you have a little stipend so you can pay your rent and eat, and then if you want like a bonus, you do whatever, but like just this, and we all Western society can afford that, and why not pushing this thing, pushing back against like the whole like shock doctrine that is going on, for example in Berlin, where they like shut down homeless shelter, shut down squat. They like really like taking advantage of the pandemic to go really fast into shutting down stuff. All that for one guy can own like 5 buildings within a neighbor. Why not pushing the energy to educate and push for that, and instead like talking about, oh, like the blockchain is gonna pay everybody's rent,
like revolutionize everything.
Yeah.
You want to hear something funny about that? So his wife Holly Herndon went to Mills College for her for I believe it was her undergraduates, or maybe for her master's in electronic composition, in the late 2000s, where she began her first. Because I should also say, when Holly Herndon was coming up, laptops were not considered instruments. I don't know if you remember Resident Advisor writing articles about how CDJs and laptops were not instruments. And Holly Herndon's whole thing was doing TED Talks with a laptop and being like, ooh, look at the future. So the thing is, we are here in one of those futures, like we are in Holly Herndon's tech future right now. But the funny thing about that is that her college, Mills College, announced yesterday that in 2023, it will be giving out its final diploma. Do you know who keeps Mills College funded? Holly Herndon. That's her job as an alumni.
What?
And so that's how colleges work here. The alumni pay it forward to the colleges to keep them running, which is why there's historically Black colleges that are separate from a lot of other colleges, because we don't necessarily get to participate in this alumni donation / generational admission structure that's basically a castle and an aristocracy. But yeah, what's interesting about that is in Alabama, at the University of Alabama, there's a woman, I can't remember her name, she may be dead now, hopefully, but she basically owns, and through her donation money, she owns the women's dorms. And because of that ownership, she's allowed to say that the women at this university or within these dorms cannot have male guests. They have to wear, dress a certain way and act in ladylike fashions. And it's pushing a very gender defined, very like anti-feminist, but like matriarchal, like thing on the women because she owns the dorms. That's how this works. And the way to fix this is for someone like Holly to maybe sell an NFT and then give all of that money to Mills College to make sure that it stays open so that another Holly Herndon could come down the line. But as we see, Matt and Holly, not to criticize, but they are in Berlin. They left this country and they are applying for German citizenship, and they live above hard wax, and they're currently jettisoning into the future while the places that gave them their funding are collapsing.
Yeah, that's a good thing that you mentioned hardworks, because like Kreuzberg, it's the epicenter of Berlin gentrification. It's been gentrified, So it's like, and that's the thing. It's like people like them participate into the destruction of what make the city that they moved in interesting in the first place. So
this is colonialism.
Yeah.
It's just colonialism and resource extraction over and over and over.
Yeah.
Even if it's on purpose.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. I think that's going to be our final comment. We did go a little over, but honestly, the conversation was so interesting. I don't even mind. John, do you have any final words? Thank you so much for co-hosting Biblioteka Records with Ryerson.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure. This was absolutely fascinating. Thanks so much, Sean and DeForrest, and for everyone who attended, and some really amazing questions. This really, I think, pushed the envelope in terms of, really thinking through critically the implications of everything that's going on right now with music and technology. So really appreciated the opportunity to hear from both of you and from everyone who joined. Thanks, Sofie, for putting this together and organizing it and coming up with the idea for this in the first place. I was happy to support it. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much, DeForrest. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, John. Thank you to everyone who attended. I will be emailing out the recording tonight or tomorrow, along with links to Jean and DeForrest's social media, so you can follow them on there. Keep up what they're up to doing, because DeForrest got a book coming out later this year. Jean is constantly writing interesting articles. So definitely keep up if you are into this kind of stuff. And thank you so much for attending. Thank you again, both of you, for speaking. And I really appreciate it. And we'll be in touch.
Thank you for having us.
And thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Oh my God.